powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Geoff Mosher's in the house today. It's a Monday with Mosher as we take a look at the move the Eagles made today. It's a big one. It is a historical one, really. The Eagles have the highest paid player in the history of the NFL. How long will that last? What does it mean? Geoff Mosher's in the house to break it all down. Jalen Hurts gets a 5-year extension. He will play on his final year of his original rookie deal, Geoff Mosher. So let's break it down for the listeners out there. When we tell them, hey, Jalen Hurts gets paid, what does this contract mean in your eyes for Hurts, and what does the deal mean for the Eagles?
Oh, man. You know what, Mike? There's really not a whole lot to read into this deeper than what it is. What it is a long-term extension for Jalen Hurts that makes him, as you just mentioned, for now, the highest paid player in the NFL, which for most times for quarterbacks lasts about maybe a month. And then what it does, though, is makes him very secure. He's got 4 extra years added to this following year. So it's really like a 5-year deal. I'm sorry, a 6-year deal in totality, although it carries him till 2028, and this coming season was his last year. So in reality, it's 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 6 years. And then, there was no sort of quote unquote hometown discount. He made every penny that he deserved. Now the guaranteed money, I believe, There always sometimes seems to be a discrepancy, right, between the initial guaranteed money report and then what it actually looks like when you see the structure. It could be in the form of option bonuses where you have to be on the roster a certain number of days into the new league year. So we'll see when that comes out. But assuming that there's not anything too crazy or funky about it, it looks like he's got the most guaranteed money for a quarterback not named Deshaun Watson, who just has another level of guaranteed money, right? I think it was 230. I think it was fully contract, fully guaranteed. So it's a high scale, upper echelon quarterback, MVP, Pro Bowl caliber quarterback renegotiation extension.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the follow up to that would be, does this deal set both Hurts and the Eagles up for future success the way it's structured here?
Well, I think it's not about the deal that helps out the Eagles. It's about the fact that they got Jalen Hurts in the second round. So this year he was supposed to have a cap figure of about $4.8 million, if I'm correct on that. Compare that to
I think it's around, you're right, about 5, yeah.
Right. So compare that to what Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow, right, are supposed to make, or even someone like Lamar on the franchise tag. So that's a lot more money those 3 guys would be making this year. So what the Eagles can do is take a chunk of that $180 million, right, of new money, new guaranteed money, if that's the number, and let's say they take $20 million of it and put it into this year's cap. So now it raises his cap from just under 5 to 25. Well, that's a lot. It's a big raise. That's $20 million, right? However, to have a quarterback making $25 million compared to Aaron Rodgers right now, who's on $50 million a year, or anybody, the Russell Wilson who's on $48 and $49 a year, it's still manageable and allows Howie at least flexibility for this year to be able to do some things. And then also you're taking that money out of the money that you have to spread out from 2024 to 2028. So it makes that a little bit smaller, which helps make the cap charge a little smaller year to year. Now, when you're talking $50 million a year, it's big regardless, right? So even if it winds up being like 46 some years, it's still a lot, but that's the market. So it does allow that. The Seahawks did that with Russell Wilson on their first extension. They put a lot of the new money in the last year of his rookie deal, which was very low, and it allowed them to keep the cap charge going forward in the extension a little bit lower than a guy who's a first-round pick.
Yeah, we're talking with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4, InsideTheBirds.com. Obviously, Hurts signs a huge deal today. Are you surprised, Mosh, that Hurts took less guaranteed money. A lot of people talking about, he didn't get as much money as a Kyler Murray. The fact that it seems like he did a team-friendly deal to help out the Eagles.
So I was under the impression, and I'm looking again, that he got more guaranteed money than Kyler. Isn't the reports that he has $180 million guaranteed?
100, yeah, it's like 179, something to that effect. I mean,
Right.
Essentially, he's in the same ballpark as a guy like Kyler Murray. I don't think the contract as a whole is as much as Murray's deal.
Yeah, I was under the impression Murray's was about 160 of guaranteed money. So, again, and Kyler Murray, again, when you're a first round pick, your number is going to look a little more because when the team starts to extend with you, they already know in order to get you on the 5th-year option, in order to have you on a year of franchise tag, any control that team has over you starts at like high, between $40 and $50 million right now. So you're always going to see those guys get a little bit more guaranteed money from the start. The idea that Jalen Hurts was a second-round pick and wasn't sort of quote-unquote guaranteed that 5th-year option of $40 and $50 million, whatever, or top market money helps the team a little bit. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't see it either team-friendly or player-friendly. I think, Jalen Hurts is making a lot of money here, and he's up there with the top quarterbacks in the league.
Well, I guess the one thing that a lot of fans get into is once you pay – we hear all the time – once you pay the quarterback – then it's difficult. Does this deal look like a deal that is going to hamstring this team to be able to do stuff moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think everything's relative. Like, I know Patrick Mahomes doesn't make $50 million, but he makes $45 million annually, which is a lot of money, right? I mean, it may not, sure, that $5 million extra can always help, but that might be a player, depending on who that player is, right? To me, that's still high-end money, and yet the Chiefs just won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, the Rams 2 years ago won the Super Bowl with Matt Stafford. He was making high-end quarterback money at the time. It's not impossible does it make things harder? Sure. But it's not like your chances are done as soon as you pay a quarterback a lot of money. And I think Howie Roseman's done a pretty good job of figuring out ways to bring in good players at cost-efficient prices, the way he did with, C.J. Gardner-Johnson last year and James Bradbury and some other players in the past.
Well, Jeff, obviously the Eagles had a situation like this a couple years ago with Carson Wentz, where they paid him before they had to pay him. Do you look at, we had a text message earlier that said the Eagles panicked here. They overpaid him because they didn't want a Lamar Jackson situation. Do you think the Eagles in this situation panicked?
Well, I don't think that statement is accurate. They panicked because they overpaid him because they don't want a Lamar Jackson situation. Well, the reality is when Lamar Jackson does finally sign an extension, and the same thing with Herbert and the same thing with Burrow, that number ain't getting smaller. So they didn't overpay him. If anything, they paid him first to try to curtail having to pay him more like a month or two down the road. Who knows whenever those guys might sign their deals. So that's how I look at it. And here's how I view it. And I'm probably, like you, I just try to view it impartially and objectively based on what I know about the league and people I speak to, right? If you think you have a really good quarterback that's going to be around for a while, better to pay that guy earlier than later. Look what the Cowboys did with Dak Prescott. It cost them a ton of extra money that they had to wind up paying when they didn't extend him earlier, right? So is there a risk involved? Did the Carson Wentz contract show that risk is certainly a part of doing business? Yeah, there's always risk involved. So, but there's also reward involved. So yes, it's risky, but it's also really high reward if by this time next year, 5 other quarterbacks are making $5 to $10 million more than Jalen Hurts. That's the game you got to play. And for anyone that says, yeah, but you could just wait and wait, I say, well, what does that mean? Like, the only way you win in that situation is if you wait and your quarterback wasn't that good and you avoided having to pay him a gajillion dollars. But guess what? If your quarterback wasn't that good, you probably didn't have a very good year. So it's not like there's some grass is greener scenario to not paying Jalen Hurts.
Right. Well, and I guess, it's hard. Like, it's easy for a fan to say, look, and I can see from this perspective, he only had one good year. I have to make a decision based on 1 year. He's played 2 years. The year before, if he had the year last year, he's not getting $51 million.
Correct.
So
correct. You have to look at the improvement there and say, did my quarterback improve from year to year? Yes, he did. Did he improve as a passer? Yes, he did. Did he then take another step and become an MVP/Pro Bowl candidate? Yes, he did. Now, I mean, you can also say, is there a chance he could regress? Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that he needs to be surrounded by this much talent to be that good? Yes, sir. I mean, that's the game that every GM plays. So
right. So
it's not like
people
the Eagles are
that's
different
the
than any
thing.
other team.
Is when you say they panicked or whatever, it's you want all the you want perfection. Like you want hey, Jalen, play on the last year of your contract. Show us that you can do it again. That's not good business, though. I mean, that's not a good way to have a relationship with your star player.
I'm not 100% sure he would have played under this current contract. For some guys, that is very risky. Running backs, especially. Le'Veon Bell tried that. I guess he didn't win he got that big deal from the Jets, but reports were that it wasn't as much as the Steelers offered. If Jalen Hurts sat for a year, that puts are the Eagles really going to allow that to happen? Are they going to sit there and try to win games with Ian Book? Right. It's for both sides. This made sense. I just don't think that he would have played under that kind of contract. And I don't think the Eagles would have wanted to have taken that gamble, especially coming off a Super Bowl.
Yeah. Right. Well, I agree with you. I mean, if he played the way he did last year, takes his team to the Super Bowl, by the way, had a very good performance in the Super Bowl. It's not like he went into that game and didn't perform. He performed in the biggest game of the year, had a season that put him number 2 in the MVP. There's a good possibility that you're right, that he would say, I'm not taking a chance of playing for $4 million, after what I just did. Now, it's hard for fans to come to terms with, you signed a contract, you have to play. Yeah, in our mind, we want to see the guy play because he signed a contract. But in his mind, he's saying, I'm not playing under that deal. I've outperformed that contract. Now the result is this, which I think is a win-win for both sides. I think Hurts gets his money. He gets to say, I'm the highest paid player in the league for a month. And then the Eagles say, we've got enough flexibility, Moshe, that in 2023, this coming season, we can still help this team become a better football team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of these moves that the Eagles made to try to fill some holes obviously came before they paid Jalen Hurts that money. And I'm sure that was intentional too. Wanted to see what they could be able to do. And I anticipate Howie now will kind of, he knows what he's got, and he can shift focus here to trying to get this team better with A, draft picks, and B, any kind of trade market that he can find where he's getting a pretty good talent who's on a rookie deal still and cost controlled.
There's
Tim Jernigan, by the way, always a great example. How they got Tim Jernigan for basically flipping places in the third round with the Baltimore Ravens. They got themselves a starting defensive tackle. Remember that? That was one of his more shrewd deals as well.
Yeah, and that Jernigan deal, and obviously we've seen other ones, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, A.J. Brown on draft night. Everybody anticipates something like that. Now, Moshe, over the weekend, it was, a lot of buzz around Budda Baker. Does that profile as something that Howie Roseman would get into, or do you think the money would be too much of an issue there?
Well, he was extended, if I'm not mistaken.
He's got 2 years left on the deal with no guaranteed money. That's why he wants out of that deal.
So you're basically only taking on this year's salary, and then whatever is of it is not guaranteed, because anything already guaranteed from a bonus standpoint drains to the Arizona Cardinals. So it looks like, 2023? Oh, geez, though, it's a pretty high base salary there. $13 million.
Make it like $12.5, $13 million.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it can be done very easily. I trade for Budda Baker and I give him a 4-year extension, and I push that money into years 2, 3, and 4, right, and make year 1 low or year 1 and 2. It can be done. No question about it.
Is that the kind of player, though, that makes sense. I mean, every time whenever there's a big player, Jeff, why don't we go after Devin White? Why don't we go after this big-name player? Is this a big-name player? This guy's a two-time All-Pro. He's a young player, very good. Would he be the kind of player that you say, you know what, that's the kind of player we would do something, to try to make a splash?
It's a good question. I would like to say yes, but then I also think
whereas like Devin White, you would probably say no. He's a linebacker.
Correct.
He's getting paid way too much money. I wouldn't give up. Would you give up pick 30 to get Budda Baker?
No, because he's 28 years old and he's only got 1 year left on his contract. So that wouldn't make any sense. I mean, you're getting a guy 5 years of control. It's not like A.J. Brown, who still had 2 years left and is very young and his best days ahead. Not that Budda Baker's best days aren't, but that's just a little bit too old for me. Although, if you really want to have this, I mean, it all depends, because the 30th pick is a first-round pick, but as we all know, there are not 30 or 31 first-round graded players. So the real question is, do the Eagles think that Budda Baker is worth what they would consider kind of a second-round pick? And then maybe the 30th overall is something. I don't know how they have them evaluated. I have to see what they think about Budda Baker, and I'll look into that. But I still think that they'd be fairly reluctant. They would think better off a second-round pick or a third-round pick because of the lack of control there on the player, but not a first-round pick, even the 30th overall. And the other reason I say I would like to, but I'm not sure, is because, as you mentioned, he's a safety, and they didn't want to commit too much money to C.J. Gardner-Johnson after Gardner-Johnson was one of their best players on defense last year. Now, there were other factors involved there, but the bottom line is they didn't want to commit that kind of money to. Would they want to commit that kind of money to Budda Baker? I don't know.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds, and check out their latest podcast. Andrew DeCecco checks in with the guys to talk a little bit about the draft, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the draft. One thing I want to get your opinion on the draft, Moshe, is, we keep talking about the possibility of a Bijan Robinson at running back. Everybody loves the skill position players. What about Jackson Smith and Jigba as the best receiver? Would that be something that would surprise you if they traded back and said, you know what, we're going to take a wide receiver? They have taken wide receivers in the first round.
It would surprise me. It would still surprise me. I mean, I think that when you look at this draft and the assortment of defensive ends and defensive tackles that are going to be available in the first round, even some offensive linemen, although I don't know that they need to go there, but you never know. When you just look at a number of positions or players at positions that they prioritize in the first round heavily, knowing that they've used 2 first-round picks the last 2 years on wide receivers anyway, and they've both been good. I think I'd be surprised if for the third straight year a first-round pick got used on a wide receiver.
Geoff Mosher, of course, Inside the Birds, InsideTheBirds.com, the new Inside the Birds podcast. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts, on all podcasting platforms, and, of course, right here during Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. A historic day for the Eagles. They signed Jalen Hurts to a $51 million per year deal. That extension starts next season for Hurts and the Eagles. All right, man. Appreciate it.
By the way, it would actually be 4 straight years, now that I think about it, that you would use a first-round pick on a receiver. If you go back to Jalen Reagor, then Smith, then A.J. Brown last year, and then in your scenario, doing it again with Smith and Jigba or somebody else. Don't see that one happening. Have a good one, man.
All right, man. Take care. Geoff Mosher, of course, InsideTheBirds.com, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN